Hey folks, Rob Daniels here from the movie, TV, and video game soundtrack program Visions in Sound. I am on 12 to 2 a.m. every Saturday morning on 98.5 CKWR. You can also find me on my website, visionsinsound.ca. With me, as always, is my furry companion, Gimli. He is the show cat, and he is been with me 17 of the 25 years of the show so far. Yeah, okay. So I have two guests with me today, and so what I'm going to do is going to have you guys introduce yourselves. So we'll start with Eric. And well, as my friend Scott used to say, who are you and what do you do?
My name is Erik Woods, and I am the host and executive producer of the Cinematic Sound Radio podcast, which has been on the air and online for 28 years. And yeah, that's what I do.
Okay. Jason.
And I'm Jason Drury, who's the presenter and producer of The Archive and Talking Soundtracks on the Cinematic Sound Radio podcast network. And my
All right.
executive producer is around somewhere, but she will due to appear any sometime during this, I am sure. So they can say Gimli and Munchie can say hello.
For sure. So what our goal was for today and what the is um because we are in the month of November and it's Remembrance Day, in both Canada and the UK. And we wanted to choose in this case three war films. We were originally going to go with four, but we don't want to like I mean the video last time with Eric and I when we chose four, we were pushing 2 hours. So um I think 2 hours is a reasonable time, and if we were to go any more, it would just be crazy. So yeah. All right. So basically, do we want to do what we did the last time? And I'll start just to
Sounds
kind of
good.
get things going. Okay, so for me, this was a choice of of first of all, there are not many notable World War One films that I have seen. Second, Canadian story World War One films. So for me, I had to think about what I was doing, and I wanted to definitely choose a Canadian story. And so I went with, let's give me a second here. I went with Jan A.P. Kasmerik's Passchendaele. And for me, I saw this in the theater, and I was like just absolutely blown away by Kasmerik's score. It has just this heart to it that just runs through the entire film. Um Paul, this Passchendaele, from what I understand, is kind of Paul Gross's Citizen Kane. So this was his big film. This was the film that was going to put um the whole kind of make him a big thing. It was Canada's. It was I think believe it was one of the most expensive films, Canadian films at that time. I can't speak to that directly, but I think that's pretty much there. So yeah, Kasmerik's music is just it it's so beautiful, and it flows so well. There's a great track on here called There Is a River. it's such just this phenomenal, um, beautiful sounding, um, tragic, tragic track, and it, like I said, the whole tragic thing goes through the entire score as well, and it's one of those. I was fortunate enough because as soon as this is a Passchendaele was a limited release. And I thought to myself, well, I got to get on this right away. I think it was like limited to 1,000. And I'm so glad I picked it up because it's become, in my opinion, one of my favorite war film scores of that era of World War One. Because again, it tells a Canadian story, but it also has a wonderful score in the meantime. And it, like I said, so thematic, so beautiful. And again, it to me, um, it tugs on those feels and really makes you empathize with these soldiers and the situations that they have to deal with. And it's just for me, it makes me want to go see the film again. But Passchendaele is very hard to find, and that's a shame because again, it's a Canadian story, and I feel that it should be told. So yeah, my first choice for of the three recommendations is Passchendaele by unfortunately the late Jan A.P. Gazmarek.
I'm kind of disappointed that they didn't hire a Canadian to write the score. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering what was happening there. Was it contractual? I don't know. Or maybe he just loved the composer and always wanted to work with him. But
Mhm.
that's one that's one thing that disappoints me about that. Although, like
Yes.
you said, the score is fine. Um, and the film itself, I rented it. That was like a blockbuster rental.
Right.
And I it it the I think the battle sequences are great, and you never really get to see like World War One featured on film that
No.
often. Although All Quiet on the Western Front finally opened that up for the world to experience that type of battle because
Hmm.
it's vastly different than what you see in World War II films
Yes.
or Vietnam films as well. The problem is the film suffers from that Pearl Harbor syndrome of going after the love story and trying to tell a similar tale that, it's a tragic tale with a love story. And so you're going back to Titanic and and it loses me for that whole portion. Like most of the film is about this love story.
Yeah.
And then finally you get to this incredible action sequence, which is Saving Private Ryan, but in World War One. But it's an important story to tell, and I kind of wish they focused more on the soldiers, did a band of brothers, more so than trying to do a Pearl Harbor slash
Well, I mean, you
Titanic.
could take a look at the art. It looks
Yeah,
like Band of Brothers.
and that's where I think to open up World War One, especially a prominent Canadian battle in World War One, that's I think where they needed to go. But the score is lovely. Again, I just kind of wish that. I'm sure Howard Shore would have cost a fortune, but just somebody Canadian writing music for a
Yeah.
Canadian story
Canadian story. Yeah.
would have been great. But I was when I remember when they released the score, I'm like, oh my God, look at that! That's a Canadian movie, and they think it's important enough to. But then Robert Townsend working at Varese Sarabande at the time as well. I mean, of course he's going to know this movie, and I'm glad he released it.
Yeah.
On a thoughts, I haven't got much to say about Passchendaele because I haven't seen it and I haven't heard the score, so I'll be looking forward to seeing it or hearing it in due time. And you have a disadvantage in Canada because, of course, I live in Ramsgate and the war was really on our doorstep in the 1940s. Ramsgate was heavily bombed during the war, and as a Ramsgate, a lot of people had to evacuate and even take shelter in one of the major tunnels over here. So, and had to be and Ramsgate itself had to be rebuilt during the war. So it I can understand that in Canada it's very difficult to have a war film as a subject. But the thing is that for Canadians, I know a lot of Canadians contributed to the war, took part during the war, and bravely lost their lives during the war. And today, as you say, is the 10th of September. Today is the 9th of November, and tonight around 9 o'clock, there is a Royal Festival of Remembrance at the Royal Albert Hall, which is here every year. And I'm sure the Canadians who were involved in the war will be highly, highly appreciative of what, and we all be appreciative of what they did during the war. And also, I'm sure, as every year, tomorrow, on the march down the Cenotaph, there'll be some Canadian veterans walking past the Cenotaph, which is wonderful. And it's always good to see the Canadian Army being represented in these sorts of events, because they did so much to help the Allies during the war, and talking the Second World War, and also in the First World War, because a lot of them signed up during the First World War. And Passchendaele is a very famous battle during the war, which a lot of Canadians unfortunately lost their lives, and we have to respect the Commonwealth nations on how they contributed during the war. So that'd be a very interesting film to have a look at in due time for myself. Oh, of course, World War II. There's a lot of great war films, World War II, and I was brought up watching these war films when I was younger. You know, the great ones like Kelly's Heroes, Dirty Dozen. That was shown recently on British TV on one of the channels, and that still holds up really, really well. And also saw recently The Guns of Navarone. But my first choice is an absolute staple, shown every year in the UK over Christmas, I'm sure everywhere around the world. Elmer Bernstein's Great Escape. One of the greatest film scores ever composed, one of the greatest war film scores ever composed by the great Elmer Bernstein. It is every time I listen to it, it's such a wonderful essay in how to write a war film score, with all the brilliant themes in there, and particularly towards the end of it, the action sequences with the iconic Steve McQueen with his motorcycle being chased by himself, as he was one of the Nazis as well. It still holds up today wonderfully, and all the great British actors like David McCallum and a few other people, like the guy who was in Doctor Who, was in there as a small role. What a cast of main cast: Charles Bronson, James Colburn, Richard Attenborough, brilliant performance by Richard Attenborough, Donald Pleasance. I can see still. James Garner, amazing film. All topped up by a magnificent score by Elmer Bernstein, who wraps up the tension, the tribute towards the end, wonderfully, and really just it's like a real. Just it's wonderful. Describes the action all the way through to this amazing score. have great memories actually hearing the score live in at the Royal Albert Hall. I think in 2001, Emma Bernstein's 80th birthday concert. He played it as a encore when Great Escape started. The audience started applauding, and I do also at the end of it. He was taking his bows, and suddenly the door opened, and Michael Aspel walked into the arena saying, "Before you make a great escape tonight, Emma Bernstein, this is your life." So, and I was shouting, "Do it here, do it here!" But of course, he must have been so tired. It must have been done that evening at 1 o'clock in the morning. And to be honest, when I saw the show, I was really disappointed. He looked like somebody who didn't know what was going on half the time. Because when they mentioned the Great Escape, it's one of those football chants that England always have. They always do. It always comes up with the man with the trumpet starts playing it. So it's more or less a football chant over here as well. But the Great Escape is overall is one of the greatest scores ever composed, and also one of the greatest, as I said, one of the greatest war film scores ever composed. It's terrific, and Emma Bernstein, he was on a roll with John Sturges, the director. A few years before that, he did Magnificent Seven. A few years later, he kind of topped himself even more with this wonderful work, The Great Escape.
Do you have a favorite release of The Great Escape?
They get better every time. The Varese one's quite a good one, but the Entrada one's magnificent. I just got that recently. It's a magnificent release with all this. Even it's got the complete score and also the soundtrack album, which was performed by a smaller orchestra. I think it was 32 players. And I think The Great Escape was 60, because it's usually during the 1960s. Emma Bernstein usually had a 60-piece orchestra and made it sound like 160. So I think the best release for it is the Entrada release, but any release you can get for it, it's worth your money, worth whatever release you have. But I think the Entrada one is more open, because I think it's still available and it's not a limited edition. So if you haven't heard The Great Escape, haven't seen The Great Escape, where have you been these last 50, 60 years?
Yeah,
because it is one of the great war movies of all time, and Emma Bernstein's music is now iconic.
Have you heard the Royal Scottish National Orchestra re-recording
I
that
think
was
I
supposed to
have.
be on Varese, but that and the Magnificent Seven, but I think it was then released on RCA
Yeah,
Victor for contractual reasons. But I mean, when you talk about expanding the score to a massive orchestra, I mean, that thing sounds enormous.
I remember that night at Royal Albert Hall at the interval. I think it was the biggest brass section I ever saw in my life. I did all the jazz stuff of Emma Bernstein and the Magnificent Seven Suite, and it was a wonderful surprise. I was waiting for the Great Escape to turn up for the entire evening. When it came up as the encore, everybody stood up and applauded, and it's just a memorable evening, which it still stands in the memory of what's watching and seeing Emma Bernstein live, and that performance is one of my favourite concert performances of all time.
Well, I'm gonna kind of go back to World War One, but this one's a bit more of a fun picture, a dogfighting film made in 1966 called The Blue Max.
ah,
And this score, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, or even you, Rob. I think this is one of the most re-released scores of all time, of at least Goldsmith's filmography. But I think Inchon is sort of creeping up to be like the most re-released Goldsmith score of all time. But it's
It's
been released.
overdue. It's overdue a re-release.
Yes, absolutely, for sure. Because every time we hear about a new release of a Jerry Goldsmith score, I think the joke is now the Blue Max or Inchon. But I think Inchon's just going to keep every couple of years, and Trotta's just going to keep releasing it. But yeah, this was released on like LP at the time when the film came out. I think it made its first appearance on CD on Varese Sarabande Records, or at least Masters Film Music, when Robert Townsend was still in Whitby, Ontario, with his small record label. Came out on a complete edition, I think, on Columbia Legacy. Then Entrada released a remastered complete version of it. It came out recently again on La La Land Records, I think
yeah.
on volume 5 of their Goldsmith on Fox. It was re-recorded in full by Tadlow Music, and I have a whole pile of them here to show you. So there's the Columbia Legacy. That's Entrada, still in shrink wrap. The re-recording with some of the most beautiful artwork I have ever seen, and this recording is sensational. But my favorite performance of the Blue Max comes from the Philharmonia Orchestra performance on the Jerry Goldsmith Suites and Themes album that was released again on Masters Film Music by Robert Townsend. I think it was originally released in the UK with horrible, horrible artwork. But then it was released here on Masters Film Music, and many people mistaken the concert hall as the Barbican because I think that's where the concert was
Right.
in 1987. And they had the concert, but then the next day they went to another facility or recording hall and recorded this album. But this is from an unused poster for a canceled concert that was going to take place in Toronto. That's
Oh,
Roy Thompson Hall. And so Robert Townsend commissioned this from Bob Peck. And so instead of, not using that art, uh, he used it for that album. And then, of course, it was re-released again on Silva Screen with pretty crappy artwork and an extra track, which is Legend from the National Philharmonic. And I think Goldsmith recorded a track from Legend during those sessions, but didn't like it, didn't like the performance, so he didn't put it on that album. But I'd like to hear it.
yeah.
Anyway, back to the Blue Max. There's, I think, 16 and a half minutes of this absolutely incredible score on that album, beautifully recorded by Mike Ross Trevor. It's one of my favorite re-recordings of all time, and it's the first time I ever heard the score to the Blue Max. And it is one of Goldsmith's first big, large-scale orchestral scores. That theme gets a major workout, and I think in the film, the filmmakers loved the theme so much they just kept on repeating it, repeating it, repeating it, repeating it, and many of the cues that Goldsmith wrote in the movie weren't used. But there's a brilliant main theme with a wind machine, which just makes this score soar. There's a love theme and tons of action music. And so, we all think about war movies, and some of them are deeply dramatic, and some of them are fun, like The Great Escape, and some of them are just, let's have a good time at the movies, and we'll watch a dog fighting film. And I saw this for the first time a couple of years ago, and the cinematography is absolutely gorgeous. And think it was made in 1966, real airplanes,
Yeah.
stunning stuff. So if
Yes.
you're in for in-camera effects and you want to see how they used to do it, and then hear this absolutely breathtaking score by Jerry Goldsmith, I highly recommend just listening to the suite. You get everything you need in that 16 and a half minutes. You get the overture, the first flight, the bridge, the attack, and the finale. And I mean, besides some of those amazing Charles Gerhardt recordings, I don't think I've heard a better recording of film music than on the Suites and Themes album. So my first recommendation is The Blue Max by Jerry Goldsmith.
Cool. Now, it is there has there ever been an explanation as to why the Blue Max becomes this most released and most recorded score?
I think for the re-recordings, it's just the sound on the original recording. I mean, it's not great, and they've done what they could to the original recording. And it sounds fine, but it's archival.
Hmm.
But I think for re-recording it in full, just to hear it with that beautiful, pristine digital sound, and especially at a time when the City of Prague Philharmonic were really, really kind of on top of their game, because earlier on in the 90s they weren't that great. But at the time when Tadlow started doing all of these new re-recordings of complete scores, the City of Prague Philharmonic is just a top-notch, world-class orchestra now, and the recording sounds amazing. So as for its re-release constantly, I don't know. I don't know why. Maybe it was a Nick Redman thing at 20th Century Fox, and he just had access to it. And once the license is over, it's like it's a great score. That's the thing. It's a brilliant, brilliant score to release, but there's so many different versions of it, right? There's the LP version, then there's the CD, the truncated CD. Now you have the complete version on CD. You have this re-recording, you have the suite. Um, and then, of course, when you have a box set of Jerry Goldsmith at 20th Century Fox, of course, you're going to throw the Blue Max on
Of
there. So,
course.
but I mean, it's not as if it's a bad score. It
No.
is personally one of my top 10 Jerry Goldsmith scores of all time. And I mean, from note one right to the end, this thing is stunning. So it doesn't matter which one you get, really, but I would say start with the suite on the suites and themes, and then go for one of those complete versions, whether it's on La La Land or Entrada. But even the re-recording just really it opens up the score and gives you kind of a better appreciation for those cues that aren't in the suite but are on the original soundtrack recording that don't sound great, but just again expands it and just makes you appreciate this score over and over again.
It's one thing that about Blue Max is the very first time Joe Goldsmith worked with the National Philharmonic, and
Yeah.
and he wanted, well, the director John Gulliman wanted 100 musicians at all costs. He said it was something big 100, and Joe Goldsmith said in one of the concerts where he played it, he said, yeah, he budgeted for 99. I thought it should save money in the budget, but in the end, I want 100 musicians, so just added an extra violin, so we got his 100.
Yeah.
One of
Again,
the great, one of those great Jerry Goldsmith stories he used to do during his concerts.
yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, this it's a suite that should be played in concert halls all the time. It would just knock you on your butt
Just
all
have to
the
play
time.
first attack and you're in.
Oh, I
It was,
know.
that was the first bit of Blue Max I ever heard, and actually
Yeah.
from when he played it, I think it was a concert they did. I think maybe was it if in 1980s. It was a 7 o'clock. It was I think a 2 hour concert on BBC Radio 2. Goldsmith did a concert, I mean, in Nottingham when he was like introducing it as well. But this one he was just, I think he also introduced this one a little bit. And one of the first thing he played in this concert was the attack from the Blue Max, and it completely blew me away. I said, I've got to get some of this music now from that point onwards. It was absolutely amazing piece of music. I remember
Well, the
the other piece that he played in it was like the Marlin attack from Islands in the Stream. So it's really good stuff in that concert.
well, the
Well, Ray,
concert that this is based on happened in March of 1987, and it was at the Barbican, and it's actually the very first Jerry Goldsmith conducted concert ever. He had never done it before. And so this is the first time he actually went out and had a program of just his music and conducted it. So it's a significant release
mm,
in within Jerry Goldsmith's time frame now as a conductor.
So my next choice again, and I wanted to do some deep cuts here, stuff that you wouldn't necessarily think of the first time, but are really good releases. And for me, whenever I would go to The Beat Goes On, this score would be there. I wasn't familiar with the film. I wasn't, um, and I kept thinking to myself, hemming and hawing as to whether or not I was going to pick it up, whether or not I was gonna do anything with it. And I thought to myself, well, you know what? I'll pick it up and see what this is all about. So it's well, first of all, there is an actor on the cover that I immediately recognized and went. So I had to do a little bit of research here. So this is the Victor Davies score to a film called For the Moment. And this is the story of airmen from around the world training in a Manitoba facility, just prior or during World War II. And the actor, I don't know if you can see it on the front, that's Russell Crowe, a very young Russell Crowe. And the Victor Davies score, yeah, there are some moments in it where you're um it's definitely there he's definitely channeling the music of the era, but there are a couple of cues on here of the Flyboys, which just is a lovely um introduction to these airmen. Um Again, with most war films, you're talking tragedy. So there's like, Tell Her I'll Be Waiting and Death of a Warrior. There's some really beautiful music on here. And I just noticed this now, but there's the name Eric Tomlinson on here. So I thought to myself, holy crap, this guy was associated with this. So that's pretty cool. That's why
Where was it recorded?
it was recorded in, hang on just a second. I need to look. I hate having to take my glasses up. You don't get old, people. Really don't.
Who's this guy?
Um, it was recorded by the Czech Symphony Orchestra.
Oh,
Where?
Just be during his freelance period after he left
yeah. What was it? What's the
handheld
year
Navy
again on that?
Wales.
90. No, the film is 93, but this is a 94 release.
That's kind of near the tail end of his career,
Yeah,
Thomas's career. That's interesting. I'd love to hear that.
this is
So would
great.
I.
This
So
is
would I.
fantastic. And guys, for a while it was everywhere. Like
Hmm.
I couldn't go into a I couldn't go into any of the charity shops or any of the thrift stores and not see a copy of this. So for some reason, there was a bunch of them that kind of just got either put out there and then just distributed to these thrift stores. But yeah, I found this at The Beat Goes On. It is a fabulous listen. And I mean, it's I had first of all, I had never heard of Victor Davies before. And so to have a listen, to have a score like this, telling again, and I go back to the whole idea, it's a Canadian story. Manitoba, it doesn't get any more Canadian than that.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's for me, it was and the fact that it's got Russell Crowe in it was another factor for me. So there's a whole bunch of factors here that I was like, I have to listen to this. I have to pick it up. And I am so glad I picked it up. I have yet to see the film, but you get the tragedy of war. You get the tragedy of these guys that have that will only be in this place for a short period of time, which is why I think it's called For the Moment, because they're only there and you have to kind of live for the moment, which is I think a great sentiment for this film. But yeah, to I don't even this has a I don't even think it's an official release.
Yeah, I was
So
going to ask, what was the label?
um it's funny here. Let's see. Publishers Warner Brothers.
Huh.
Hmm.
Um, John Aaron Productions out of Winnipeg. The the thing on the side, I was looking at the catalog number. It's FMT 1942. Well,
Mm.
Mm.
for the moment,
Hmm.
1942, which is probably when the film is set.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking this was probably either a promotional release or um or something like that because like I said If for a while it was everywhere in these stores, and then now I'm I'm damned if I can find it anywhere else. And like
Who,
I said,
who
I'm glad
exactly
I
produced it? Could I probably not give us an idea if it was what label could it be from? Or
it doesn't.
it could be like a 4-day faxing job, maybe.
Golden Toad Music.
Golden.
Um, Publisher was Malnick Music,
Hmm.
Chapel Music. Um, but yeah, the name that jumped out at me right away was Eric Tomlinson, and I
Mm.
went, wait a second.
Yeah.
But you know what? I honestly don't think this got an official release. This may have been, you know what? I may track down Victor Davies because I believe he's still alive and find out what the deal was on this score.
That would be
Mm.
awesome.
Because yeah, this for me was one of those great finds that you blind buys. I often talk about, the blind buys and that sort of thing. And you get to you get to a certain point where you're um sometimes you'll see a score out in the wild and you'll look at it and you'll go, haven't heard of this film or haven't don't know enough about it, but the price is right. So I'll
Yeah.
pick it up and have a listen. And I'm glad I picked this one up for the moment.
Well, I hope
Victor
you do get to
Davies.
talk to him because I am obsessed with Eric Tomlinson, and I would love to hear that story. I'm not because I bet you $100 that story has never been told. Like what is it like working with a legendary recording engineer like him? I mean,
Yeah,
we all know about his Star Wars and London Symphony recordings and his James Bond recordings and things of that sort. But
yeah,
later on in his career, I would love to know, like what was his mic setup? What was he doing? Is he still
Mm.
recording the same way? That would be utterly fascinating. I mean, amongst hearing about the creation of the score itself, but I mean,
yes,
just I know Chris Malone would probably get a kick out of it too, because he's
Yeah.
a huge Eric Tomlinson fan. But I mean, just for my own curiosity, I would love to hear any stories from that. God, it's a legendary recording engineer and one of
yeah,
my time favorites.
And if
yeah,
it was at the time when he was a lot of composers worked with Thompson when he was away, when he stopped working in London and certain places like in Hungary, he worked with Buzz Apollodorus, even worked with Christopher Young for The Fly too.
yeah,
So many composers worked with him after he left London, after left the base of Abbey Road, and produced some wonderful music. And I'll be fascinated too how he met Eric Thompson, and found out how he managed to record this
Yeah,
very obscure score.
yes.
indeed.
So yeah, that I'm like sometimes folks just take a chance on an unusual release. You will be pleasantly surprised.
And as a coda to one of your recent shows, Eric Thompson also recorded one of our favourite films, Rob the Dead Son,
Ah,
with John McClure. If you look on this, his name appears on the credits of that as well, because he recorded Cayman's early scores, including Brazil. So Eric Tomlinson's always his name seems to appear a lot when you least expect it at
Yeah,
times.
cool. All right, Jason, what do you got for us? What else?
Now, this next one for me was recorded by John Richards, but don't. It's nothing to do with him. He's still a pretty good score, even if you say that. Nothing against John Richards. It sounds like Eric Tomlinson. It's a darn good score, and it's one of the iconic war films. It's something you don't get these days. The tongue-in-cheek, war film with a lot of action, and it just completely goes completely balmy. This one is the balmiest war film of all time, and still stands up today. Got saw it a couple of days back, and it's still an amazing score. All I've got to say for the stars are Clint Eastwood and Richard Burton, and you know exactly what I'm going to talk about. Where Eagles Dare. What a movie, and what a score by Ron Goodwin. It was the master over here of the great war films. He did some great stuff like 633 Squadron, iconic theme, and also the Battle of Britain, which also is a terrific score, even though he had a difficult position of replacing Sir William Wharton. But his score is still highly creditable and still good to this day. He seemed to have a real knack of doing these great war films, and until James Horner came along, I always thought of Ron Goodwin was the master of the skies. He could do the aerial stuff so well, and particularly on one film, particularly the Magnificent Men and the Flying Machines. It's some magnificent aerial music in that. But where Eagles Dare though is it's just iconic because of that wonderful main title, which da 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 da. Showing an aeroplane doing the start the mission. The wacky twists in the middle of the film, everything. Who's the hero here and who's the Nazi? This is terrific. And then at the end of the film, Clint Eastwood gets his guns out and starts shooting every Nazi in sight with an unlimited number of bullets, which is still always hilarious, but still terrific to watch. All backed up by this magnificent score by Ron Goodwin, who uses that main theme so well. It really, it is more or less the main theme with a little bit of extras, and also one of the highlights to me of the score is the cable car sequence with the fight on the cable car. And but it's the same cue both sides. It does the same thing. This suspense music really does work with the movie. Really, adds to the tension and suspense. Is Richard Burton going to survive these people trying to kill him on top of the cable car? Who's going to survive? It's absolutely classic Ron Goodwin. It is one of the greatest scores of all time, just like The Great Escape. It's iconic. It's a film. Every time you see it, you just look forward to listening to Ron Goodwin's music as well. It's amazing work, and yet again, and a great score like The Great Escape as to the film, and I think I read somewhere that I think today I was reading something about the movie, and it said about Clint Eastwood's nothing matched the action and the killings of people of the baddies of Clint Eastwood until Rambo turned up. But in my opinion, in a way, this is a far superior film, directed by Brian G. Hutton. Some great British cast as well: Donna Houston and Peter Barkworth as two Nazi traitors. Patrick Wymark as the boss, who could be a good guy. You have to find out if you see the film if he's a good guy or not. But Clint Eastwood looking absolutely perplexed doing most of it and saying what the hell's going on here, which probably most of the audience were at the time. But it's great. The way Eagles Dare, it is popcorn fun extreme, and I don't think there was a film like it until I think this year with the this is a honourable mention Chris Benstead's work on the Ministry of Ungenderary Warfare. It came out this year, which was that's sort of directed by Guy Ritchie, which was a film which has that sort of that daring do part of it, and it reminded me. Also, this seems to these great old classic war films that everybody's shooting people and with a smile on their face and a tongue in their cheek. It was that sort of atmosphere on that film. And I thought I've never seen this film. It's like 19. This is the first time I've seen this sort of film since the 1960s. And I thought, wow, this is amazing, and I had a great fun with that. But it had a lot of things, a lot of tipping its hat to films like Where Eagles Dare, which is still today one of the great war films of all time. And the best release of it is a complete version on FSM, doubled up with another interesting war film, Operation Crossbow. That's the release you need to look after. That's the release you need to find. Probably in the fifth show. It's probably out of print ages ago, but if you can find it, it'd be well worth it. Listening to another great, all-time great war film music scores.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with Ron Goodwin.
No.
This stuff. I mean, if you ever get a chance to, and Rob, you know that I'm a huge fan of this channel's releases, and I think you are now. You
Yeah.
got to find the film music of Ron Goodwin.
Yeah.
They're all great albums, but man, that one, top to tail, there's not a bad cue on that album, and again, sounds absolutely incredible. So, if anybody out there is not familiar with Ron Goodwin, that's a perfect place to start.
He did score war films, and he was also a great comedy writer as well. I think if you get his score for Monte Carlo or Bus, that is a terrific comedy score, and also Mr. Men and the Flying Machines. I hope one day they'll release some of his early stuff from the British comedy films he did in the 1960s with Norman Wisdom. There's one score which I would really love to release. It's called The Early Bird. Norman Wisdom plays this milkman, and the first 20 minutes of it is like a silent film, all done with Ron Goodwin's music. And if that release comes up, I'll be the first in the queue.
Now, Ron Goodwin, Battle of Britain. Am I recalling correctly? Okay.
I did mention that. Yeah, Battle of Britain.
Yeah. Cool.
Also, he did some Disney stuff towards the end of his career, like Candle Shoe and The Spaceman and King Arthur, and a few other Disney movies. But 1960s, that was his peak time. I also another Disney film I remember just now. One of our dinosaurs is missing. One of the first films I ever saw in the cinema. That was in 1976 when I was really, really young. It doubled up with the Jungle Book. So I've got some great memories of Ron Goodwin music. I think I was weaned on this stuff at a very young age.
That's very cool. No, I'm again, and going back to the you mentioned the Chandos releases. One of the things that I really believe in when it comes to compilation releases, that's Ramon Gambon.
Raymond Gamba and BBC
Gamba.
Phil. Yeah.
Yeah. Those are the releases that spark the interest, at least in my opinion. So if it hadn't been for you suggesting that I go and listen to Ralph Vaughan Williams, that pick up that set, I never would have heard 49th Parallel, or it would have been like years before I discovered it, or Scott of the Antarctic. Anyway, but yeah, getting these compilations, like when his name always escapes me, Erik Kunzel, when his compilations would come out, yeah, if it hadn't been for him, I don't think I would have been a soundtrack collector. So yeah, personally, I wouldn't mind checking out Where Eagles Dare, because I personally I don't go out of my way to watch war films, but I will for
you'll love this war film.
Okay.
It's completely whack. It's completely. Halfway through the film, who the hell's that art scene, he was a good guy. What's going on here? He could, in the middle of it, could piss about this great speech about these. We're Nazi from the SS, and we've got to trying to find these British spies. And you think, who's good? And then he starts putting a gun at Clint Eastwood. Said, what's going on here? Is he the good guy? Is he the bad guy? And who's what? And I think the people in the room are confused. You all need to be confused, but how that ends is brilliant. And Clint Eastwood starts then murdering Nazis by the dozen afterwards. If you want to see Nazis being killed by the thousands, just watch Clint Eastwood with his gun and shooting everybody in sight. So it is terrific.
with endless bullets.
Yeah, with
With endless bullets and where you just all the way through. I have great regard of that film. It's a wonderful escapist sort of film. It was written by one of the great writers in the UK, Alistair MacLean, who's done some, he wrote the novel Guns of Navarone, another great war film. So, and he's done a lot of great stuff. But anything Alistair MacLean, it's always got twists and turns by the dozen, and it's entertaining. You may not be historically accurate, but these films never are. But it's just you go in there and just have fun and just leave your brain in the foyer and just enjoy watching it. And as it's even though it's nearly out 50, 60 odd years, 50 years old, it's almost over 50 years old, it still stands up today as a wonderful, entertaining work by director Brian G. Hutton, whose next film turned out to be Kelly's Heroes, starring Clint Eastwood and Tate Tavares, which was like a World War II comedy. So this guy was a good director, and he chose some decent composers like Ron Goodwin here, and for Kelly's Heroes, he had the services of Lalo Schifrin, so he knew a good composer when he saw one.
Hmm. Very cool. All right, Eric, what do you got for us?
Mine's a little more conventional. It's a John Williams score, but it's not that John Williams score. I am not going to be talking about
Not
Saving Private Ryan.
that John Williams score.
Although, I mean, Saving Private Ryan might be one of the most influential Steven Spielberg films I've ever seen. I saw it 4 times in the theater. The fourth time, I think I had about 103 fever when my friend dragged me to go see it, but I was going to go see it anyway because that film just blew me away, and so much so that I made an attempt at my own World War II picture, and it was a short film that we are still one scene away from completing. But that one was, yeah, and the score by John Williams is absolutely incredible, and it's very sparse. And well, so the other World War II film, back in 1987, Steven Spielberg's Empire of the Sun. Again, there's a lot of score that wasn't used, a lot of score that was replaced and whatnot. But I remember seeing it, man, in my early 20s, and having seen a lot of Spielberg's more adventure-filled films. This was really one of the first dramatic efforts that I saw. It's a film that is probably one of his 2 most misunderstood films. I read a lot of reviews, and many people didn't understand what this film was about and why it was told the way it was. The other film is AI, artificial intelligence, and both of those films need multiple viewings to truly appreciate. But this is Empire of the Sun is Steven Spielberg's first great dramatic film. Even though he did Color Purple a couple of years earlier, I think that one was a bit of a miss. I think he found his ground with Empire of the Sun, and World War II has always fascinated him. And of course, any film with children in it, he does so well.
Yeah.
And this is one of the first appearances of Christian Bale, young Christian Bale, along with.
I think it's the very first appearance of Christian Bale.
He's magnificent, and the fact that he didn't get more recognition for awards is a tragedy. This kid carried the film, absolutely carried it, and he was absolutely brilliant. Based on J.G. Ballard's semi-autobiographical novel. He spent time as a kid in Shanghai in the 1930s. He was in that British international settlement. with the European and American settlers. And after Pearl Harbor, they were all rounded up by the Japanese and sent into camps for, I think, about 3 or 4 years. Rough time. But what's so great about this film is that, and especially the story of the novel, he didn't want to tell the factual events. We're watching this film through a child's eyes, and that's the most important part. And we all know this now. I mean, I think that the film has garnered more appreciation, and people finally understand what this film is all about, but they just didn't get it. They were wondering why it was so, wide-eyed and fantastical and like did this stuff really happen? The stuff really did happen, but again, you're looking at it through a child's eyes. And if you heard any story from a child, the story is always bigger than life. And they're not remembering every detail, but they might insert something that just makes it more grand. So a lot of the things that you see in this film, again, very over exaggerated. And so John Williams attacks this score in 3 different ways, and that's the most fascinating part about this release, the La La Land release, and all the liner notes, and just the way that the score was deconstructed, and a lot of the stuff that I now know about the score came from the liner notes, and so again, John Williams deconstructing the score in 3 different ways. First is kind of in a way where the events on screen aren't really real. They're not of Jim's imagination, but they're basically of the landscape or the atmosphere itself. Very dark tones, very serious writing. If you think of the pheasant hunt sequence, where he's in the swamp, and that's it's a very real sequence. And John Williams scores it that way. The second type is more of a again a real memory, but a more shocking memory to Jim himself, and that is the invasion by the Japanese, and that whole sequence where he's separated from his parents for the first time. He's living this wonderful life as a kid, and all of a sudden reality strikes, and now he's separated from his parents, and he's never going to see them again, although he thinks he is, because of course he goes back to his house, but then he gets rounded up, and yeah. But then the third part is, I think, the best part, and that matches basically the child's perception of what is happening. And that is the more kind of Jim's imagination and religioso aspect of the score, even though Ballard wasn't religious at all. But you get these wonderful heavenly choral cues, very pastoral writing, and this all comes out in one of the first major sequences that is like, yeah, right, this didn't actually happen. So when Jim is looking at the Japanese A6M0 for the very first time, and the sparks are flying, and he's just in awe of this aircraft, and he reaches out and he has to touch it. A very human thing, a very human emotion. The connection between the thing that is almost a dream, and then finally he gets to touch it. It still isn't the plane that he loves the most, which is the P-51 Mustang. But then, but that's where John Williams really introduces that angelic choir that will then just absolutely explode in Cadillac of the Skies. And that sequence, I remember seeing that. Well, first, I first heard that cue on the Spielberg Williams collaboration, and I had a totally different idea of what that music was for. My idea was like a fallen soldier that was finally reuniting with, let's say, his family or his wife, and coming up over the hill on a road, and you'd have this wonderful, beautiful, melodramatic finale. It almost seems that way in this film, at this sequence when the P-51s are bombing the Japanese airstrip. And what is what's so great about it is that Jim essentially is having a religious experience, but it's also larger than life. There's no way he could be where he is. There's no way he could experience the way it was, experience the bombing the way it was. And the best part is when everything just slows down.
Mm.
And even John Williams just strips everything away, and all you hear is this choir as we get to see the pilot basically waving to Jim. And that's when Jim absolutely loses his mind. I get goosebumps just thinking about this. And Williams is just pouring it on, and Jim's freaking out, P-51 Cadillac of the skies, and there's explosions all over the place, planes flying all over. It's one of the most incredible sequences
Mm.
that Steven Spielberg has ever produced. And I think that's the part that people just don't get. It's a yeah, right sequence. But it is a yeah, right sequence in Jim's mind. He probably did experience this. But again, would the pilot have slow mode flown by him, said, "Hey, how's it going, kid?" and then dropped a bomb? No. But that's what's so great about a child's imagination. And then John Williams at that time is playing into that imagination, that emotion, that feeling, and he does it so well. And it's just one of the great John Williams cues amongst the hundreds of great John
Yeah.
Williams cues. But and I think this is one of the first scores, if not the first score, that John Williams had Sean Murphy record the
Right.
score, although it
I
was
think it was Armin Steiner, wasn't
Armin
it? Or
Steiner remixed it.
oh, right.
So he was
No,
working with
it's
Armin
not.
Steiner at the time, but Sean Murphy,
Oh, yeah, you're
who
right.
had been working with Horner for a few years, as well. I think this is the first time they collaborate, and it's
You're
important
right.
because they've been inseparable almost the entire from 1987 on. Um, and yeah, so not a traditional World War II film, but a very interesting story, again from a child's point of view. And what also makes this special is that it's my dad's favorite movie of all time. And when he told me that, I was like, oh man, that's so awesome. So anytime I play this, I think about him. And yeah, it's again, if you can find the La La Land release, pretty sure it's out of print now, but there's just so many
Mm.
alternate cues that really expand the score and what John Williams was thinking at the time, and then having to replace some of the cues, and just another masterful release from La La Land Records and Mike Mendocino.
Yeah. And the original release was 54 minutes long. It was quite
Oh,
a good one as well.
no
That was a
kidding.
pretty good release too.
It
Very
was.
good representation of the score. I remember going to see. Did you see the Empire of the Sun in the cinema,
Oh,
Eric?
no, no, no. I saw it on
I
uh
re
VHS.
the scene you mentioned about the sparks and he's holding his hand up to the Japanese soldier. I remember that scene well because that brought on after a little while that you went blank and the words intermission turned up when I saw it. That was where the intermission was placed, and it
Oh.
looks as though Spielberg put the intermission in there because it was, suddenly you all went blank, intermission turned off, and the next scene afterwards you saw it was that wonderful cue that Williams did. It's called Jim's New Life when he's prancing around and enjoying himself in the
Yeah,
camp. That's when the film restarted. So if that's probably that's the music. In a way, that's probably was John, way it sounded like it was just John. Well, if I remember rightly, when the cue was played in the theatres over here, when the intermission started, John Williams' score just faded out at the end, and that cue still stayed in the on the album.
huh.
In that respect, so it was a dramatic. It's a great way of ending in the first half of the movie because it kind of, if you think about it, it sets up what happened. This is him being uh, Christian Bale's character, this is Jim being caught by the Japanese. This is when he's more or less surrenders. He goes to the camp, and then 6 months later, you see him, you know, thinking it's a game at the first point and enjoying himself and running around and having a
Exactly.
wonderful time and playing like it's a normal thing.
Yes.
But that is because so that was the point of the movie. I think so. That's the like a end of the act, and it was the best way for the interview to turn up. I think it was deliberately done by Spielberg. I think it was on the films that it sounded typical Spielberg style. So they had it's such a great film. It's a long film and probably needed the intermission, and it was a very good. And you see intermissions these days can be put in funny places. That was a perfect place to put the intermission to the movie. And then what happened afterwards, I fully agree. Catalog of the Skies is one of the greatest cues of all time by John Williams. One of the top cues with the videos. Other people deserve mention in the acting roles. Nigel Havers is good in it. Miranda Richardson, the good performance by the great Leslie Phillips as well. Really some good work by British actors, and of course John Malkovich is in the film, and he does a very good performance as this guy that defends Jim. It's a very good movie. It's one of I think people said about the film Spielberg was trying, he's trying to get his Oscar nomination here now. He's doing Oscar work. I did notice a lot of people went into the cinema thinking when I saw it, I think we're thinking this is not a Steven Spielberg film. Where's all the action, all the adventure stuff? But
Yeah.
it wasn't that sort of film. And
It's
and you buy in if you buy into that, you still get a lot of enjoyment. This is not Steven. This is not Indiana Jones. This is not Close Encounters. This is a different sort of Spielberg film. And people may say it didn't work out for him. I thought it was terrific. I got into it and I saw what he was doing. And I think the next time we did that sort of film was Schindler's List, and he absolutely nailed it. So it would have, I think, for what he did for Empire of the Sun, we wouldn't have got the masterpiece, which is Schindler's List, because of it.
No, I agree. And if he kept on doing, these action adventure type films, he would have been worn out. And I mean, he still tried to do that. We had Hook in 91. He was still, in Indiana Jones University, in 89. Tried again something a little bit more dramatic with Always, and that didn't really stick. But the thing about Empire of the Sun, and Spielberg being a huge fan of David Lean, this is his David Lean
Yeah.
picture. But Spielberg is just meant to work in every single genre, and it's too bad that he was pigeonholed um at that time. And I mean, it was around that same time that he wanted to do Schindler's List, and I'm glad that he got The Color Purple out of the way, and then very much improved dramatically with Empire of the Sun. The Color Purple is just too flashy for the story that's being told. I mean, it's beautiful to look at. It just feels like it's excessive.
Hmm.
Too many weird tricks and whatnot. And he simplified his filmmaking style here for this one. And again, it does feel more not documentary like
Mm.
Schindler's List is, but there's growth there. And it's just too bad people didn't take it seriously, because this one, again, should have won all of the awards. It's really a mature film for someone that young, and I'm glad he did it at that time as well. I just think that more people really do need to see Empire of the Sun, because it's just a mix of everything that makes Steven Spielberg great. Um, and yeah, I can't recommend it highly enough. And again, I mean, yeah, and then you brought up Jim's New Life, and again, another one of those kind of fantastical cues. Like you said, Jim's just having a good time in the camp. It's like, what?
If if
You
if you
know?
if you can have a good time in that sort of camp,
Yeah, and all the end credit cue.
it's exhausted justice, and it
Yeah,
called.
I mean, holy smokes! It comes up briefly in the score proper, but
Yeah.
then just this
Mm.
wonderful expanded version on the end credits. You're like, man, John Williams outdoing himself. He even wrote like an Indiana Jones-esque action cue for the chase through the streets of Shanghai, which you're like, this is so out of place. But
It
actually, again,
it it felt it
It's
felt for
Jim's
me
score in his head, right? It's
if
like I'm
if
escaping from the Japanese, and it's all
yeah,
very, yeah,
it felt like a Owen Allen film at times. I thought like it was very interesting. It wasn't very a tonal sort of action cue, but it worked so well in the picture.
I agree. So check it out, folks. It's
I
awesome.
hate to admit this.
Underrated classic, I think we
I
could call that.
agree.
I hate to admit this. I
You
have
never
never
seen it.
seen the film, nor have I ever heard the score.
Wow, remedy
So
that immediately.
Where have you been?
well, I think I kind of maybe dismissed Empire of the Sun as being as I think a lot of people would, or at the time. This is not Steven Spielberg. What is this? And I think I maybe have heard. What year did this come out?
87.
87.
87. So yeah, I would have been.
I remember getting the soundtrack the same year on cassette as Who Framed Roger Rabbit, so I know the year it came out. I
Yeah,
got it for Christmas.
I probably would have dismissed it because I would have been. Um, yeah, I was 17 and I'm not into dramatic films, so yeah, I would have I would have dismissed it. Now, it's interesting, and like I said, I do definitely want to see it. But has the film changed for you at all, Eric, over the years from when you've watched it, when you first watched it to when you've watched it today, or watched it like recently?
I just think my, again, on repeated viewings, just my appreciation for it and just how disappointed I was at everybody else who just didn't get it.
Right.
And I'm watching it going, how could you not? But I mean, I think again, it's been talked about so much now, and again, with the advent of YouTube and film reviewers and whatnot, you can you can get an idea of what this film is about. But it just seems like one of those movies that everybody forgets about in Steven Spielberg's
Yeah.
filmography, right? They almost want to skip from Color Purple and head off to Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And it's I have to see it again. I haven't seen it in a really, really long time. And but I think, Steven Spielberg's command of child actors, I mean, it was brilliant in E.T., but it's just so spot on here again with Christian Bale, who's just a natural. He's absolutely, like, you watch him as a kid and you see him now, and he's just as good, and he carries the movie. That's the thing, he carries it, and that's a hard thing to do. But I also, again, I appreciate the filmmaking technique. I appreciate everything filmed in camera, like the whole P-51 sequence. They were using these giant models for a lot of the flyby sequences. So, and forced perspective. And so, I mean, they didn't actually have the P-51s, except for a couple of shots. But then when they were doing the bombing runs, they had like a miniature airport and these miniature aircrafts dropping. But then again, you have actors in frame as well. And it's just, you're like, how did they do that? And then you appreciate that art form, the visual effects on screen. But it's again, it's very serious. There's a lot of interesting, um, serious themes in the film as well. And you are almost exhausted by the end. You feel for Jim, who's gone through how many years of this, the pain that he's going through. And just there's one sequence, I don't want to ruin it for you, but it's a sequence where he's giving someone a hug right at the end, and
Mm.
just his eyes are so heavy, but he opens his eyes just for one moment to see something very specific. But you feel it's like, oh man, that was a rough one to go through. But it is it's magnificent. Again, you think about Spielberg and dramatic movies, and you're thinking about any time after 1993 and what he attempted to do and transition as a more serious filmmaker. He was already a great serious filmmaker, even in the, the era of Raiders of the Lost Ark and ET and whatnot. There are some wonderful, very serious dramatic moments in those films, and that all comes out in Empire of the Sun. And again, I just appreciate that film more and more every time I see it.
Um, okay.
Yes, it
I'm
gets more harrowing for Jim as the film develops towards the end of it. He goes through a real rough ride towards the end of the movie.
Oh my goodness,
And
yeah.
it's a complete contrast to the start of the second act when he's just having fun and games.
Hmm. He
It's no
grows
game.
up.
It's no game at the end of it.
Yeah. It's a loss of innocence for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. And that's the key theme of this one.
Uh,
And he has to grow up and grow up fast.
And
And
I haven't seen the film for a long time, but I probably guess it's stuck in the memory.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's one of Spielberg. To me, it's one of Spielberg's great movies.
I absolutely agree.
okay.
And hopefully it should be shown more over here as well. I don't think I've seen it been advertised on TV for a long, long time, but it's one of those forgotten films which it should be remembered. Oh, it's shown a lot more over your side of the pond than here.
Yeah. I Guys, based on your recommendation, I think I might just, as soon as we're done here, try and seek it out just to see what
I
it's what
really hope you're not disappointed with it, but I mean, yeah, I I don't want to, you know,
you don't want to build it up.
raise
You
it
don't
up
want to
too much, but again, there's just you have to have patience with it. That's for sure. It is a long movie, but it's a very rewarding, and the emotions will just be wow, it'll drain you for sure, but
for sure.
it's rewarding. It's very rewarding.
Yeah.
And I hope we get through it. Just think that little boy turned out to be Batman in later life.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, my last choice. Um, I was thinking about this, and um, I was going through my collection, and I was thinking, well, we've talked about various war stories and that sort of thing. Interesting that Eric, you would have Empire of the Sun as your one of your choices. I'll take you back to 2017. We talked about this just before we started recording about my Thrift on Kent experience, and that I went in there, and this was at a time when a little voice in the back of my head told me go to Thrift on Kent. So I went to Thrift on Kent, and I ended up walking out of there with some really great finds that, in a video I'm going to do in a couple of weeks. I'm going to talk about these the I think the 30 finds that I made in that thrift store that day. But one of the more interesting finds that I found was whenever we think of Japanese cinema, we think of ninjas or we think of Godzilla. This changed my mind. This is the 2009 score to a film called, and hopefully I'm pronouncing this correctly, Manatsu no Orion, which translates as Last Operation Under the Orion. The composer here, Taro Iwashiro, and again, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, throughout the entire score has this sadness that just permeates the entire score. It reminded me a lot of Saving Private Ryan and those kind of of war scores. Um, it's kind of um a weird take, but um in I think it was the second episode 2 of Attack of the Clones, they talk about heroes on both sides. And I never really understood that statement until I actually discovered that the film Last Operation of the Orion is actually, I didn't realize, but it's actually free online. So
I was
for
able
me, this takes this um Saving Private Ryan um era and gives, it's essentially about um a Japanese sub crew, and it's told in flashback. And one of the gifts that is given to this one this one submariner before he goes away um is this uh sheet of music. And the music plays a pivotal role throughout the entire film, and this little theme pops up every once in a while. it's essentially the music that's on this sheet of paper and that sort of. It's a really lovely score, and it is. What can I say that it's if you I mean I had never even heard of the film, let alone so to have this score just pop up and just take a chance on it. I mean, it's not like I paid a lot for it. I mean, this has ended up being like one of those $1.50 purchases that I found. But for me, for me is one of those finds that is it says to me that film is universal, and to tell your stories, no matter whose side you were on, is important, which is why I chose Canadian stories to start, and I thought this was an appropriate follow-up to Empire of the Sun, to have those stories told and to have um those war um those war things documented, and to make sure that history doesn't forget these stories and that they are not whitewashed away, or they're not swept away by revisionist history and that sort of thing. And for me, this is like I said, it's got some really great moments in it. There's a track on here called Requiem for the Orion, and it just like it's one of those cues that just grabs onto you and just tugs on those heartstrings. But yeah, I did not expect to like this score as much as I did, and I am so glad that I picked it up. So yeah, um, again, I apologize to any of the Japanese out there if I'm butchering this. Manatsu no Orion, or in this case, again, translated as Last Operation Under the Orion. Tiaro Iwashira, what a score. I am so happy I picked it up.
I would
And
love to hear it. I mean,
Me
yeah,
too.
Japanese scores are so, I mean, even now, just sound like good old-fashioned classic Hollywood.
Mm.
They
exactly.
embrace the orchestra.
Yeah.
They love the orchestra. They love themes. They love melody. It doesn't matter what the subject matter is. Um, it's always spot on emotionally. So that's one I would love to hear. I mean, you talk about um, you know, films told from a different perspective.
Hmm.
Um, that always first reminds me of Tora Tora Tora,
Mm.
Yeah.
because you're getting the American and Japanese point of view. It also reminds me of a recent movie that came out, which is, God, it's hard hitting, tough one to watch. I highly recommend everybody watches it because it is it's a revolutionary movie, I think.
Hmm.
That's just the way that it was filmed. It's called The Zone of Interest. And what is absolutely fascinating about that film, and it's told from the Nazis' point of view. They are right next to, I think it's Auschwitz, or it's one of the concentration camps, but it tells their mundane, or it tells the story of their mundane life. They live as if everything is normal. What
I've
they are
heard
doing is normal.
I've heard of this, and I
It
was
came out last year.
yeah, I'm trying to think. I'm
You,
sorry, what was the name again?
it's called The Zone of Interest.
Zone of Interest. Okay, yeah, because I had heard about this. On of all places, Red Letter Media.
Yeah,
And so yeah, I yeah, I thought
it's you have first of all, the way they filmed it is incredible. And it is absolutely a special effects picture because of all the cameras they had to take out of each and every room, because they set up cameras in every room in this real house,
oh, and yeah, and the Corridor
right?
Crew talked about this
Yeah.
too.
And so they're like certain scenes are happening in the kitchen,
Yeah,
scenes are happening in the bedroom, scenes are happening in the living room, scenes are happening outside, all in real time. They
yeah,
all have an idea of what they have to do, the actors. Um, but there's dozens and dozens of cameras in each and every room. They're not
yeah.
moving, although there are portions where the camera does move outside.
Mhm.
But they're it's almost stage acting.
Yeah.
But again, it's you watch it and you're like, okay, this is evil. They don't
Yes.
know it's evil. They know that again, what they are doing is absolutely the right thing, and their life is normal, and they will always live life this way. And so we've always seen the perspective of, let's say, um, the Americans, or the Allies, or the struggle of people in the concentration camps and whatnot during World War II, but seeing it from the German perspective of this family just living their normal life, going about their day, going to work. I mean, the
Hmm.
guy is going to work to exterminate Jews. And he's just like, I'm going to have a cup of coffee, kiss my kids, and I'm going to go to work. That was their normal. And so, you're talking about that film, from the Japanese point of view, right?
Hmm.
Heroes on both sides. It's they thought what they were doing was right. And
Exactly.
those types of films really fascinate me the most, because we've kind of seen the perspective of the Allies and whatnot, but it's like, tell it from the other side. Let's see what was
Yeah.
going on there.
There's a couple of movies that brings to mind. There's one I think one of the last Sam Peckinpah films, Cross of Iron. Ever seen that with James
No.
Coburn? That's a
I've
very
heard of it.
anti-war movie, and he's on the Western people on the Western Front wanting to escape the war. That's a really good movie. And you talk about on the Nazis, on the opposition side, like the Nazis. It's one that really does stand out for me. Is the boat, Das Boot,
Yeah,
the Germans in the submarine. And
absolutely.
there's also something else that brought to mind talking about the final solution. There was this really, it's just too cool thinking about it. I think it was a TV film that Kenneth Branagh did, and I think it was
Oh.
when they were talking about the final solution and what they were going to do, and it's mostly all dialogue, but the dialogue just crawls off on your spine. It's so harrowing and horrendous what they're talking about, and they're talking about it like it's nothing like normal. It's just
Yeah,
maybe a bit like topical at the moment because of what's been happening, but yeah, it's that sort of feeling of well, we'll do this to the Jews, or we don't mind, well, we'll kill a few Jews, it make no difference. It is absolutely toe-curlingly oppressive and harrowing what they're talking about, and they're talking about it like it's a normal thing. This is what we're going to do. We're going to kill all these Jews, and this is a good thing. No, it is. It was horrible, horrible,
hmm
horrible, but it was well acted by Kenneth Branagh's involved. He always get a good performance, and it was an
Yeah.
excellent film. But it did leave a horrible taste in the mouth watching it.
Hmm.
yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I am now really looking forward to seeing the rest of the film. I only got, like I said, through part of it, and I'm very interested to see where it goes. I mean, it does have this kind of standard human story about it, and I think that's what we should remember in all of this is that war stories are human stories, and regardless of I believe regardless of what side you were on, as you said, I think you said it best, Eric. You're often the hero of your own story, and you think you're doing the right thing, and history kind of decides in the end what ends up happening, or how that story is told. And I think having different perspectives and not just one is very important.
I agree.
Okay.
Now, this is not going to lighten the tone, unfortunately. It may make it even more harrowing now, I'm about to say. I I kept thinking it just came to my head today. I got to this is a war film set in Vietnam. This is I was a bit talking about Vietnam War, but this was a film that really did get to me, and it still does to this day. Listen to the music, which is an important thing about this blog. Um, it's a film which starred Michael J. Fox. He didn't do many war films, but he did this one, and it was an amazing film. It was directed by Brian De Palma. It also features Sean Penn, and ever since I've seen it, it's just given me really bad memories of it, but for in a good way. It's a film called Casualties of War. Have you heard of it?
Oh my
I, s-
God, yes.
I saw it in the theater.
It is
Came out.
superb.
It's a
Yeah.
wonderful film, but it's one of the most harrowing
It's
things I've ever
Hmm.
difficult.
seen in cinema
It's a difficult
because
one to
of
get
what.
through.
And it's probably be. I'm trying to. Hopefully, I'm going to try and, as it's on YouTube, I'll try and tone down what they said. But it is a very harrowing movie, particularly what's happened, what they do to this poor Vietnamese woman. But the thing that gets to me at the end of it is, well, first of all, it's the follow up to The Untouchables of Brian De Palma, directed by, and the music was by Ennio Morricone, and it's that final cue that still gets to me, and the visuals of that. I think I mentioned it on my archive show on Cinematic Sound Radio Network. I think I played it once and tried to describe what I felt about the ending of the film, because it is, he goes into, he's back. Michael J. Fox is back after this harrowing experience in Vietnam, and he goes into this bus and he sees a woman who is just like the poor woman, which had some horrible things done to her by this unit, but he saw and good for him refused to be part of, because of the sadisticness of Sean Penn's character. He sees a woman, and he just goes. He's in tears. He just, all of it comes back to him, and he's absolutely shocked at what has happened, and it comes out in that way, like he has like an instant nervous breakdown because of what's happened. And the music swells up so beautifully, this choral piece as well, and then Ennio Morricone's theme, which is one of the most how which is wonderful, and during the film, he just this I think it's the theme for the events that goes on. This one theme that just keeps going on. It's da, da. Da, 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 da. And he plays it even throughout when the horrible events in the film happen. It's so, every time I hear it, I get memories of the film. It's such a wonderful cue. It's a wonderful piece of music, and I know that a lot of people, probably over the States, are not fully aware of what Ennio Morricone can do. I know a lot of people, because he's an Italian composer, how he's so revered over here, over in Europe, particularly in Italy. I know a lot of my friends, particularly one who absolutely worships him in similar way that people worship Jay Goldsmith, but not in that sort of manner. But it is one of, I think, I don't. People talk about Morricone scores, things like For the Mission and from other great work. Of course, it's
Yeah.
spaghetti western music. The Untouchables are some of whose I love, but this score, for Casualties of War, is even now is in it's stuck in the memory for what was the harrowing things I watched during that movie. And I just hear that theme, and I just think about what happened to that poor woman in that film. It's an amazing theme, and it shows how why Ennio Morricone is revered as one of the greatest composers, film music composers, not just in Italy but in the world. And it was a terrific choice by De Palma to work with he worked with him in two good films like In Touch with before, completely contrast to what we got here. But it's a great score, and the two scores together are two masterworks by a masterful composer.
That's cool. I mean, I saw the film in the theaters, and I remember really wanting to get a hold of the score, but could not, I at the time I couldn't find it. And until you mentioned it just now, I'm thinking, oh yeah, that's a score that I definitely wanted to find. So yeah, it
Mm.
would be for me. I would love to get a hold of that
Mm.
if I could find it.
It ends very strangely, really, because of the first track of the album is the end title, which I thought is I think is the same thing with the Untouchables. So it
Mhm.
ends really on a slightly what happens next attitude. But
Right.
if they played it at the end like a reprise, that'd be perfect. But the end it's a 9 minute end called Casualties of War. And if the score is there in a nutshell in those 9 minutes, it's a beautiful score with a lot of choral pieces on there, a lot of lovely, beautiful choir involved with it. I think most of it's choral and some ethnic instruments towards the end of it. But it's a wonderful one of Morricone's best, and I don't see in the compilations you see a lot of these as Morricone's work. It's always overlooked, but it is one of the great Morricone cues.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm not a huge I don't have a huge Ennio Morricone collection. Um, but I have an understanding of what he did throughout his career. Um, the he only wrote a few scores for films, Western films. Um, I think this might be one of his best, if not the best, that he
Mm,
wrote
mm,
outside of Italy. And um, the film itself, I've never hated Sean Penn more.
mm.
Um, I
That's
mean,
why
just
it's good performance. He's so
oh,
good.
it's you just want to strangle him.
Yeah, you want to kill him.
And Michael J. Fox is every single emotion that you are feeling, everything that Michael J. Fox wants to
Yeah,
do in this film and to those people and help that girl, you are feeling those same
yeah,
emotions. And then Morricone just turns it on, and
yeah.
the tragedy of it all, um, the human emotion in that score. Uh, I mean, I don't know whether he scored this to picture or whether he wrote this stuff
Mm,
beforehand and whatnot, because I mean, you never really know.
no.
But he absolutely nailed it.
Mm,
It wasn't too over the top. It wasn't too bleak. It just hit. It's a classic movie score.
yeah.
Um, and these days you make a film like that, there's no way a score like this is written.
No.
It's too emotional, but it just heightens every single emotion that is displayed on screen, and it is one of the great war films.
I'm sure
Michael J.
these days the
Fox.
film would be these days the film would be scored by sound design. This would be a sound design
Oh
score.
no, no, and no doubt, and it wouldn't be half as good. And the problem is, again, Michael J. Fox was pigeonholed at that time, and
Mm,
it's probably the reason why the movie didn't do
Mhm.
better. It's not Sean Penn's name. It's it's a Michael J. Fox film, and the fact that his name is on it and it's not a comedy or Back to the Future,
mm,
people dismiss this one all the time, and much like Empire of the Sun, and this one needs to be seen by more people, and it really expands that kind of sequence that you see in Platoon. It's very similar, where
yeah.
they go into the village and just wreak havoc. This is I yeah, it's a hard one to watch, and there's so many feelings
Mm,
again that come out of watching that movie, but it is one of Michael J. Fox's greatest performances, is one of Sean Penn's greatest performances. It is just a wonderful movie with one of I mean, and Ennio Morricone wrote hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of scores, but man, it doesn't come much
mm.
better than this one. Okay, let's keep the tone as desperate and dreary as possible. But I do you know what this is? Let me preface this by saying this is one of the most personal scores that I own.
Okay.
and I'll get to that just kind of the near end of my explanation here. Um, what I'm going to play for you, or what I'm going to show you right now, is music from a television two-part television miniseries that was released in May of 2001. You can find it on YouTube, actually, if you're interested. It's called Anne Frank: The Whole Story.
Mm.
The credited composer is Graham Revell. He didn't write a single note.
Ah.
Ah.
It was written by Tim Simonek. That's the promo that Tim Simonek uh, sent my way. And actually, it's interesting. He has a little note in here where he says, finally, sorry it took so long. Enjoy. And it's a fabulous, fabulous miniseries. If you get a chance to watch it, it is really, really good. Ben Kingsley is in it. And the reason why I can say that this is a Tim Simonek score without getting in any trouble is that Graham Revell actually allowed Tim to put his name on the score cues. So even though Graham Revell gets the credit on screen, this is one where Tim Simonek can put his name on it and say I actually wrote it for him. So as much as Tim Simonek was one of the most in-demand orchestrators out there, orchestrating everything that Michael Giacchino pretty much did up until I think the second Planet of the Apes film. Um, Simonek hasn't written a lot of original film scores. Wrote one in 1989 called The Radicals, and then he wrote this absolutely gorgeous score performed by the Seattle Boys Choir called A Rumor of Angels. Wow. But anyway, this score can easily be compared to John Williams' Schindler's List. The score is dominated by a solo string instrument, but not the violin. It's the cello in this score, backed by some light woodwinds and just sweeping strings. Um, Again, the solo instrument is perfect for telling Anne Frank's tale in her family's isolation um, during World War II. And there's a wide range of emotions. It's gentle, it's innocent, but then at times appropriately tragic, tons of pathos. And so the reason why this is such a personal score to me is that I had the pleasure of hearing the end title theme played live during the recording sessions of Medal of Honor Frontline.
Mm.
I got to go see all of Michael Giacchino's Medal of Honor scores recorded live in Seattle. Great privilege and an honor, and it was just the greatest time. But this was an unexpected surprise. So, with the last few moments remaining on the last day of the scoring sessions, Michael Giacchino let Tim conduct the emotional end title theme with the Northwest Sinfonia Orchestra at Bastyr University in their gorgeous St. Thomas Chapel. If you don't know what this looks like, go out and check out the pictures. It is a beautiful, beautiful church. It's a beautiful venue. The sound shouldn't sound as good as it does. It is cavernous, but the way that engineer Steve Smith captures the music there, he did all of Michael Giacchino's Medal of Honor scores, Secret Weapons Over Normandy, Mercenaries, and he recorded the end titles because Tim, as much as the original recording sounds fine, he needed something a bit more. He needed more from the recording, so he had Steve Smith record this. This is about 3.5 minutes long, and so in the chapel, I was in the back, sitting on a ledge, and I can see Tim in front of me conducting and had the whole orchestra in front of me, and I'm kind of up by like 12 feet. He played it, and I nearly wept. I'm like, what just happened? And we had more time to record it a couple more times. The place was silent after it was done. I mean, usually after a cue is recorded, there's papers shuffling and they'll, the players will start talking. Dead silence. And it was just absolutely one of the most incredible moments of my entire life to hear this piece. And I didn't know that Tim was such a great composer. I knew he was a great orchestrator. He's a great jazz musician as well, or jazz composer and arranger. But man, he knocked us all dead that day. And thank goodness the last track on the promo is called End Titles Epilogue, the US version. I'm not sure where he recorded the entire score, the rest of the score, but it is a devastating, emotional score. And as I said, one of the most personal scores in my entire collection. I am so honored to have it. I'm so honored to have experienced that. And the score is just as good in context as well. And as I said, I think you could find the entire series on YouTube. I highly recommend you check it out. It is really, really good. And Tim honestly should have scored more films.
Okay. Well, guys, this has been amazing. We have covered some well-known scores. We've covered some obscure stuff. One thing I do want to throw in was that I was really on the fence on this one, but it's a short film, so I'll be very short about it. I wanted to include Rex Steele,
You
Nazi
would.
Smasher. I just recently found the short online
It's good.
on YouTube. It is so much fun. So over the top and
Yeah.
silly,
Yeah.
but Ryan just he approaches it very seriously. Ryan Shore, this composer, by the way, and he approaches it so seriously. The absurdity and that comes from the performances. It's so much fun, and I will link to it in this. Um,
It's interesting. We brought up Ron Goodwin. That theme is a Ron Goodwin theme. Ba-da-ba, ba-da-ba, ba-ba-ba, ba. It's so good. It's awesome.
listen
such a
to
great.
this. Gotta
Yeah,
listen to
it's
this.
fantastic. Man, the moment you said it's too short, I knew you were going to say it, and I'm glad you brought it up because I mean, man, we've been the last three scores. Whew, we've
Yeah.
just
So
been hitting
I
some
wanted to kind of
light in the tone.
lighten the tone a little bit. So yeah, for sure, I wanted to make sure that
For, for
we
everyone watching,
at
please
least
don't have
talked Rex
nightmares.
Steele.
Yeah, yeah,
I said for everyone watching, please don't have nightmares.
yeah. No, that's a great selection, man.
Yeah. No, it's like I said, I wanted to make sure that that was in there. So yeah, guys, again, really appreciate this. Um, hopefully that the listeners here and the viewers are gonna walk away with some new appreciations for classic scores and maybe some stuff that they haven't realized before. I own the Ryko disc of The Great Escape. It's only 30 minutes long. I'm thinking I gotta get the expanded the expanded
Mm.
version on that one to hear.
And have a
But yeah.
listen to the re-recording. I think it's on Spotify. I'm pretty sure it's easy. I mean, it's a tough CD to find,
Hmm.
but it was supposed to be released on Varese. It's a Robert Townsend produced
Yeah.
recording, but that and the Magnificent Seven that he did were somehow gobbled up by RCA Victor and just kind of released in limited quantities and then it just disappeared. But if you're used to the sound of the Royal Scottish National Orchestra with Robert Townsend and Varese Saraband, very concert hall sounding, but
Yeah.
the score just is enormous in that version. I highly recommend listening to that version as well.
Okay. Well, why don't we just say, Eric, where can we find you and what who are you and what do you do again?
You can find Cinematic Sound Radio at cinematicsound.net. You can find us on your favorite podcatcher. We've got an interview from Jason going up soon. Christoph Beck, if I'm not mistaken.
Hmm.
And then I'm working on a show for Maurice Jarre re-recordings. I'm working on a John Barry program, another John Barry re-recordings show. And I'm also working on my top 25 scores of the last 25 years. And I have the list. It's ready to go. I just have a lot of writing to do. But I'm so excited. I can't wait because every single one of those scores is a banger.
You
That's
just
a
gave me an
sauce.
idea. You just gave me an
That's a
idea, Eric.
sausage, Eric.
What was that?
That's a,
What was
that's a
that,
Okay.
Jason?
sausage. That's a sausage. That's a sausage, Rob. Do you
Yeah.
remember it's an in joke. I said about something was I was doing some cracking programs. They said about what sort of eggs do you like on the last Vegetarian Sound we did. Yes, it turned into like a breakfast sort of meal. But, you know, when I said towards the did my introduction at the end, I said banger, and Rob did not
Oh,
notice it.
banger. Yeah.
Rob did not notice it. I said sausages.
Well, okay.
You know,
Bangers and mash. Yeah, I
Bangers
get
and
it.
mash.
Yeah.
Okay.
you
I
got
do
me,
know what they
you got me
are.
for the egg reference, but you
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
get me
yeah.
for the sausage reference at the
Yeah.
end.
I love bangers and mash.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful. Yeah, yeah. Well,
So, Jason, where can we find you?
you can find me at cinematicsound.net, and and we've got some good stuff just come up recently about Hammer Horror, which it was a terrific show to do with John
Great show, by the
Mansell.
way. Great
Absolutely.
show.
Yeah.
I loved it. To be honest, I am also pleased with my narration on that because people know I've had problems with my voice and my diction over the years.
Dude,
But
dude.
this time I nailed it.
You were great. The writing was spectacular. John Manziel, you got to give him credit,
Yeah,
man.
yep,
What that
yep.
show was
Mm.
fantastic.
Yeah.
It's a tough act to follow. I'm going to try and keep the standard up. I've got some interviews.
Again, guys, thank you very, very much. This is always always a pleasure putting this together. Definitely, we will definitely have to do this again for something else in the near future. But again, my name's Rob Daniels. You can find me at visionsandsound.ca, but I also do a regular radio program, 12 to 2 a.m. every Saturday morning on 98.5 CKWR. And for the last, well, at this point, it'll be 23 weeks. The last 23 weeks, I've been doing little videos here and there about different reviews, about going out there and finding unusual or fantastic scores that are not necessarily the mainstream, or not your John Williams, or not your James Horner, or your Hans Zimmer, something a little bit different. Although I kind of break that rule rule in the next one. But anyway, in any case, um, have yourself a great day. Again, guys, thank you very, very much. And yeah, have yourself a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye, guys. Bye for now.